Andrew was his name, immediately blurts out, I practically quote him here, everyone knows there's no such thing as mathematically perfected economy. Now just imagine that. Why would anyone at all, ever run for the presidency of the United States of America, of all things, purporting that everyone should understand that there is no such thing, in fact, as an actual solution, which is what this statement equates to. Everyone knows that there's no such thing as mathematically perfected economy. Well, of course, I've heard this over 40 years. I've heard this assertion literally thousands of times. And I've always had a standard response. Because the math of mathematically perfected economy is as elementary gets. So my immediate response to this young man was, do you mean to tell me that if inflation and deflation are defined respectively as either increases or decreases in circulation per represented value, that there is no solution for inflation and deflation? Well, this question, as it typically is, was met with long enduring silence. And rather than even attempting to answer it, which answer any person with a responsible position that the perfection of economy is impossible would have. In other words, if you have a respectable position that the perfection of economy would be impossible somehow, you have to have an idea of how that is, you see. And that idea, in fact, has to apply to every proposition of anything which you might resolve or solve, in other words, in producing a solution, a monetary solution. And I resolved, the problems, the prospective problems, as I've explained many times, and even in these programs. I resolved, the problems which a purported economy can impose upon us to three categoric faults. These being, one, inflation, deflation, and what I've explained to be maldisposition. That is, it's not good enough to just solve inflation and deflation, that is, disproportions in circulation per represented value. We must also resolve what I call maldisposition, which is an inherent dedication of ever more of the circulation to servicing this escalating sum of artificial indebtedness under the present obfuscation of the currency, which of course has never been explained. Its ramifications have never been presented to us, so we've never decided on them. And much less have we even been provided the opportunity to do so, should we ever decide that that might be a good idea. And so our first categoric thought or fault is inflation, deflation, and maldisposition. The second I give to be systemic manipulation of the cost or value of money or property. And the third I give to be inherent, irreversible, and therefore terminal multiplication of artificial indebtedness by interest. So the solution of the third categoric fault is simple as simple gets, eradication of interest. And the solution of the first categoric fault, which is inflation, deflation, and maldisposition is likewise eradication of interest in conjunction with an obligatory schedule of payment, which retires principal at the rate of consumption or depreciation of the represented property. So in fact, not only is it possible to solve inflation and deflation, after all, when something, whatever it is defined as an increase per something else, and when something else further is defined to be a decrease in something per something else, then the only eradication of both of those two things, inflation and deflation in other words, is to maintain a circulation which is at all times equal to that something else, which is represented value. So it's obvious that there is a solution to inflation and deflation. To the most mediocre elementary mathematician, it's obvious that there's a singular solution to inflation and deflation, which is to maintain a circulation which at all times is equal to the remaining value of represented property, and then that this is only accomplished too by eradication of interest and this obligatory schedule of payment, which comprise mathematically perfected economy. In truth, that's all mathematically perfected economy really is an eradication of interest, or this exploitation, which is the means of which is terminal, and this obligatory schedule of payment, which in the end, of course, allows us to pay for a $100,000 home with a 100-year lifespan at the rate of $1,000 a year, or $83.33 a month, which is all a home would cost us under mathematically perfected economy then. And so we would realize easily by contemplating how eradicating this unjustifiable means of exploitation, which is what these purported central banking systems are, in fact a terminal means of exploitation, by eradicating that, and only by eradicating that, do we allow ourselves to exchange amongst each other so much as whatever we determine to be equal measures of our own production for whatever the production of others. That is, mathematically perfected economy and mathematically perfected economy alone are the only means of true free enterprise and monetary justice. They're the only means by which we would prosper as much as we are capable of prospering and desire to prosper justly. So when I ask this question, do you mean to tell me that if inflation and deflation are defined respectively as increases or decreases in circulation per remaining value of represented property, that there is no solution for inflation and deflation? This young man just met me with silence. He just had the audacity to tell me there's no such thing as mathematically perfected economy. And I'm about to set about, within minutes, of perfecting economy before his very eyes, because the only remaining issues is to explain this terminal obfuscation of the currency, and that it's resolved by eradication of interest. And in fact, our second categoric fault, which I give to be systemic manipulation of the cost or value of money or property, is resolved by the combination of the first and third solutions, because the only powers of the system to manipulate the cost or value of money or property are through this corruption of the volume of the circulation and its disposition. So there you have it. In as little as 5 minutes here, we've just gone over a proof, a literal proof of mathematically perfected economy ourselves, of in fact one and one only monetary solution, because impose any interest which has to be reborrowed to maintain a vital circulation, and only at a different rate do we progress to this inevitable terminal failure. The rate of interest only regulates the speed of failure. Interest is unjustified because under this obfuscation of the currency, we're not borrowing money into circulation. The banking system is merely publishing the evidence of our promissory obligations to each other. in which arrangement the bank is not even an intrinsic, has no intrinsic role. So, and much less does it incur any cost or risk that would possibly justify interest, because it's only absorbing the negligible cost of publishing the currency into circulation. In other words, for approximately $2, $100,000 is of physical money, if it's physical money, is issued into circulation. So in laundering the principal into its unjustifiable possession alone, the purported banking system is enriching itself unjustifiably, to the extent of $99,998 just in principle. Just in principle. That's the profit over the $2 cost of merely publishing the evidence of our promissory obligations to each other. Unearned profit of $99,998 on $100,000 loaned into circulation, which obligates us to pay over a long-term debt perhaps $400,000 in principal and interest out of circulation, at the end of which period of payment the ultimate debt is $400,000 in respect to a circulation which remains $100,000. So it's by understanding that these are, in fact, the fundamental faults and the fundamental causes of all of the other things that we're seeing around us, the inherent exceeding of creditworthiness explains the needs to artificially misrepresent greater creditworthiness than we actually have. I'm not justifying this, but I'm explaining how the fundamental faults of this obfuscation of the currency compel the further efforts, and that these superficial things that we do in response to this are not the matter at hand. That is, that we don't resolve our situation by outlawing them, for instance, or regulating them, or pretending that we can regulate such things as a debt ceiling, when in fact merely maintaining a vital circulation under this obfuscation of the currency itself inherently multiplies debt at an ever-escalating rate until we suffer the present terminal failure. Moreover, we understand that this is not a recession, that it's a continual process under which we suffer ever greater sums of artificial indebtedness, which dispossess us and preclude our prosperity to an ever greater and inevitably terminal degree. So nonetheless, I've made this call to the Paul campaign headquarters, and I'm speaking with this young fellow, Andrew, who's answered the phone, and I've asked him, he's blurted right out to me that everyone knows there's no such thing as mathematically perfected economy. And I've asked him this question, and he's met it with silence. An obvious question, which the most rudimentarily skilled mathematician by no more than second grade math would readily understand, just upon careful evaluation, that there is a solution, in fact, to inflation and deflation. And likewise, if I had the opportunity to explain this terminal multiplication of artificial indebtedness to him, likewise, it's readily understood by no more than second grade math. Math which all of us, all responsible citizens of a republic, are worthy